Hi, and welcome to part 2 of my engine build, take 2, where if you look at part 1, which link should be up there, you'll have seen that once again I'm taking my engine to bits on the Lexus GS430, and that's primarily because the exhaust valve guides and the valve stem seals were still letting oil seep through and get burned off in the engine. So in part 1 I got the engine apart and the heads have just been at the machine shop, and I've now just got back ready for me to start putting them back together and then putting the car back together. That I've just had the heads back from having all new exhaust valve guides fitted, which you can see all the way down there, and they've also lapped in the exhaust valves to those, and also lapped in the intake valves, and at the same time the heads have been given a bit of a skim. Only a very light one, because you really don't want to skim too much material off of these because it can throw the timing out. But one of the heads, unfortunately they didn't tell me which one, but one of the heads was a little bit bent, about 1.5 thous, so nothing massive. The head gasket probably could have taken up the slack, but at the end of the day, better off having a stitch in time now and just getting them resurfaced, rather than finding out that once again I have to take my engine apart. So the next step now is all the valves are out, and along with all the other bits and pieces are in little buckets and numbered, and the whole lot is going to go into my work where I happen to have access to a parts washer, and they'll get cleaned. So actually I didn't video the heads getting cleaned, because if you can imagine me sitting there scrubbing at them with a hose, that's pretty much it, except the hose is full of a slight caustic cleaning solution. But what I did do is clean them up, clean the faces of the exhaust, where the exhaust manifold and the intake manifold rest, so that's all nice and cleaned and a good fresh surface. And those of you that are a bit more observant will have noticed that the heads are also back together. So before I go anywhere else, I'll cut to when I put them back together. So the next thing I've got to do is get these things rebuilt. The first thing I've got to do is get the valve stem seals in. Right, that's all the seals out, and one of the things I might not have mentioned is inside each seal there's like a double groove, a little knurling or something like that, but that's just designed to grab on to the end of the valve guide and enable the seal to seat itself. So first thing to do is just gently slide the seal into the installer tool. As you see, it nestles nice up and against the end of it, and it's a 5.5mm let me see, an intake. So the intake valve seals, you can hear the two little knurled edges leaning on. I'm just going to muffle, and a couple of taps just to install, and that is one seal installed. And quick as a flash, genuinely, because this is a really useful little tool, all those valve stem seals are now installed, and now it's a case of getting the valves in. So the first thing I need to do is actually get the valves in position, and I tend to do each cylinder at a time because I've got to block off the cylinder for the next tool to work. So the first thing I do is, just having laid out all the valves, I just start putting the intake valves in. And just slide them carefully in and through one, and they're all numbered because they've been lapped in. So where are we? There we are. Number 1 and 2 intake valve, number 1, and number 2 exhaust valve. So all 4 of those valves are now in place. The next thing I'm going to do is just use a wad of cloth, and microfiber in this case, just to put some pressure on the base of the valve, and then we're ready to start putting the valves, train and stuff back in. So everything's numbered. So the first thing I'm going to do is put all the springs in, because it's simple. So back in a second. And 8. So all 16 valve springs are back in position now. And the next thing we need to do is start getting the keepers and the valve spring cap ready to go back on. So again, intake valve 1, I'll get all the stuff out. And what we should have is the bucket, the shim, the old valve stem seal, which goes in the bin, and then the valve cap and 2 keepers. And the keepers, the valve cap is slightly angled in the center bore there, and you can see in the keeper, again I'll get a photo later, there's a slight lip to it. The lip goes to the outside, so they are quite fiddly. As simple as anything. It's a case of installing the keepers in line with the angle of the cap. Once they're in place, the cap gets laid on top of the valve there, and then we're back to the Lyle 360/50 with the end cap in now, so that allows us to take stuff off. Put this in, allows you to take it back on. This engages and pushes the valve down and allows the keepers to pop into place around it. And it's just a simple case of applying it to the top, pushing down, and bingo. At that point it's just the shim on top, bucket in, and that's it done. So the car's up on jack stands, ready to go, and what I need to do now is start putting the heads together. Now, one thing to note, I'm starting with the left hand side head because there's a few little gotchas with that aren't in the workshop manual, and they start with this little bracket here, which has got a little retainer there that hooks in, and then a bolt that bolts into the head, 10mm bolt. If you do not put that bracket on before you put the head on, trust me, there is no way I've found to get it on afterwards. So I had to leave this bracket off the last time, but obviously forewarned, forearmed, it's now going back on this time. And the whole point of that bracket is to fit into this bracket, which then provides a shield for the O2 sensor and also some of the other wiring that going down there. So previously I had it just held on by the bottom bolt and placed it, I think it's actually that one it mates to, but anyway. But this one's meant to just triangulate the whole thing. So not critical, but a real pain in the neck to leave it alone. So that'll come on in a second. What I've also got to do, and that can go on later, is put the exhaust manifolds on, because you have to install the head with the manifolds on. I think I've said that before. So the first thing we're going to do is get the gaskets on, and I said I've cleaned up the mating face, I've cleaned up the studs already, they're all good to go, and therefore it's just a case of offering the manifold up and then starting to screw it in. So that's nice and simple. There's then 4 10mm bolts that hold the heat shield in place, likewise that's got to go on. And then one of the key things that I also forgot the last time is that, again, if you do not put this oil filled dipstick tube through first, and there's a place for that to attach onto, I'll find it in a second. If you do not put that on first, you cannot get that through later. Or you can, but you've just got to be a little bit creative with your dipstick tube, which is not a good idea. But anyway, another thing to note is I've got a nice new O-ring for the bottom, because you might as well. But the rest of that is just simple assembly. But if you get any of those points wrong or miss them, you will have a heck of a job trying to recover from it. And now the only thing I need to do is put the heat shield on. But once those 4 10mm bolts are on, this head is ready to be installed. So the face of the block's all been cleaned up. The head gasket is on. You'll notice the left-hand head has got that 3L marking on it, which goes top and left as you're looking back. You'll notice it lines up with the holes there. You can't return it the other way around, but just be aware there are a few dead holes that the gasket blocks up. That is perfectly normal. The main thing is that these ones are left open and that large oil gallery at the back. So now it's time to get the head and get that on. So we've got the head all set up. I've left this loose just to allow me to manoeuvre that, because the engine mount pretty much sits there on the block, so this is going to have to get fed in and around it, which is going to be complex. But everything else is ready to go. The head bolts are here, washers applied. They've got a very light coat of oil. They seem to be lightly oiled already, but I put a slight bit more on just for luck. So now it's time to get this back on. Here goes nothing. So I've got to be really careful I don't scratch the surface of the block.
A few moments later.
Right, it's on. So that's the head in. The brackets are now on, which took a little bit of clearancing of one of them, and I had to cut a notch just to allow access for the bolt to go on. But either way, they're all on, they're all tight. Dipstick's in and secured. Now I need to torque up the head. Head bolts are in and snugged. Got the pattern on a post-it note here, and all I've got to do is follow it and torque them all to 59 Newton meters. And then after that, tighten them a further 90 degrees clockwise, and that's it done. So onto that now, and that's it done. So as you can see, all the bolts are now marked, some more enthusiastically than others, thanks to the paint pen having a bit of a moment. But all I need to do now is get a breaker bar on there and then just start turning. And I want to keep on going until each of those bolts is 90 degrees clockwise. And it takes a few tries to get it right. There we go, that's one. And that's all been pointing to the sky. So that head is now installed. Now to get on to the next one. So that's the other cams in, buttoned down, torqued up. So the next thing I need to do is put the cam covers on, and before I do that I just need to put a dab of RTV in the joins where there's a right angle there, and also where the plugs are at the back, just to give a bit of extra sealing there. And then after that, on with the cam covers. And I know I'm going to have trouble with these bolts around here because access is a pain, but it's all doable. Once I've done that side, onto that side, and we're good to go. On goes the cam cover, which I've pre-cleaned, loosened up the cleaned up the gasket. That's a new one, so that's fine. Put a bit of red rubber grease on the spark plug tube seals just to make sure they mate nicely. It's just a case of offering it up and getting it on there. Which is not particularly challenging. And that's that side done. So now I just need to do the same thing on this side, and access is a lot easier here, so it should go a lot quicker. So cam cover's on and torqued. As you hopefully saw, that one was a little bit easier. Still not fun, but it's doable. So that is now cams, heads, cam covers fully on. I still need to put the VVT solenoids in, the cam position sensors in there and a few other bits and pieces, but it's starting to come together. So what I'm doing here is pre-filling the block with coolant, and the reason I'm doing that is because when I changed the coolant in this before, getting the block to actually start taking coolant in so I could start burping it and bleeding it was actually really difficult, and I've just had to drain a lot of the coolant out to get the heads off without wasting any. So I'm going to use the coolant crossover channel holes here to hopefully get a reasonable amount of coolant in there first, and that way there's at least some degree of coolant in there ready for me to start getting it in. It's going to be messy, there's not much I can do. I should see coolant start to come out of that, or approaching the top level of the rear crossover, which will tell me to stop putting in at this end. Oh, and I can see coolant coming up now. At that point, I'll stop. Save again. And this time I'm going to watch the other coolant gallery, if I can. Oh, and there we go. Oh, very close to the limit. And that is the crossovers installed, and at that point I'm going to call it a night, because I've been working most of the day. It's been a little bit warm and I've just about drunk my own body weight in water, and I'm still feeling thirsty and I'm starting to lose the light. So I think this is probably a good time to call a stop, and I'll pick this up again the next day. Well, it's another day and a lot of work's been done off camera. So the catalytic converters are now back on, the O2 sensors are in, and everything's largely buttoned up underneath. But in the background, what I've also done is recompress the tensioner, ready to go, and just fixed it with that nail. So as soon as I pull that out, up it springs, good to go. Got new intake manifold gaskets. I was going to reuse the old ones, but to be honest, I don't really want to have to take that intake off again. They weren't that expensive, and that's that done. So the plan is finish off zipping up the intake. I've already repainted and got new seals for the VVTi covers, which have come out quite nicely again. They have been a bit battered because after I painted them the first time, the engine's been apart a few more times. Also for the same reasons, I painted the oil filler neck as well, because those are the bits you're going to see in the engine and I'd like them looking decent. So all of that's done and ready to go. And then really it's just a case of backfilling all the other work I've done before, putting on the batteries, the ECUs, all the connectors, the different wiring and all the other things on the top end, then rebuilding the front with all the tensioners, pulleys, etc, etc. Then it's belts on, aux belt on, and we're ready to put the crank pulley on, fill with oil, refill the coolant, and good to go. But before I do that, there's one thing I do need to mention, which is while I was in the course of shooting this video, I passed an important first milestone on YouTube, which is over 100 subscribers, which I think is due for a little celebration. Yay! No, but seriously, I'll take a point in the middle of this video just to say thanks to all those people that have subscribed. You must be masochistic, or maybe sadistic depending on your approaches, but it is appreciated, and as you see in the comments, I do try and reply to everyone that comments, everyone that asks questions, and I find I really enjoy that side of things, so thank you for helping make this somewhat worthwhile, and bearing with me through, I think, what, third or fourth engine rebuild or major engine work now. But it is worthwhile just seeing people appear to like it, appear to appreciate it, so thanks very much for that. It is genuinely appreciated. cams and the crank and all back in time. Because of the spark plugs in, it was a bit more difficult to turn, but that's not a massive drama. And you can see on the belt I've remarked the original marks, so that goes to the left hand cam, that goes to the right, and then these marks down to the bottom correspond to the lower crank mark, and then there's another mark and then a bolt, and all of these line up with that. Okay, I'm underneath the car and you can, let me see, you can see the bottom crank timing mark and then that bolt, and then there's another mark further up there that acts as a reference, and that's where you've got to wrap the belt around. There you go, first mark aligns with the dot there, the second two bracket that screw hole there, and if we go up top you can see that those upper two marks correspond to the upper timing mark, and that's how you know the crank is timed. And what I need to do now is feed around this cam pulley and then that cam pulley. You can bring them forward a couple of teeth just to get them into line. Right, so we've got that belt on time, we've got that belt on time. You can see the crank position timer marker is still on, and underneath I can see it, you probably can't, but the rest of the time marks are on. So what I need to do now is make sure I lock that in place and put the tensioner in, but not release it yet. And that'll give enough tension on the belt that I can turn it a couple of quick revolutions and make sure all those timing marks stay aligned, and then we're ready to start putting all the pulleys back on. Well, that's 2 revolutions that were great fun because, as I said, the spark plugs are in, but right hand cam bang on, left hand cam bang on. As you can see, we're still dot to dot down below. Well, that's pretty much everything back together on the top end now. But now, like I said, belt's on, tensioner's in, so I can start putting all the different pulleys of the timing gear on, the aux belt, and get all that together. And then tomorrow we get the crank pulley bolt torqued, because I need 2 people to do that, so the father-in-law will come over and give me a hand with that. But until then I can pretty much get all the rest of the engine buttoned up tonight, and then it's just crank pulley bolt tomorrow, crank it over a few times to get oil pressure built up, and we should be good to start. Well, you probably can't see much, but as best I can tell, because it's been a long day, everything is back together and ready to go. So what I've done now is remove the fuel pump filter and fuse, and I'm just going to crank the engine a few times just to get oil circulating. So obviously I've added the whole top end apart, and I want to make sure the camshafts are getting some lubrication. So I'll do that a few times, put them back in and start it properly and hope there's no horrible noises. So here goes nothing. So I've just cranked the engine over with the fuel pump disabled about 2 or 3 times just to get the oil circulating, and now, after a very long time, I'm hoping that when I press the button and push the brake, this thing starts up and a lot of these warning lights go away. Here goes nothing. Get in there. And the only fault is TPMS, which I know about because there aren't any sensors fitted. But the engine is idling absolutely spot on. There's no check engine light. Happy days. Now the big question, which I can't answer just now because as you can see it's pitch black outside, but I'm going to run this for a little while and then see tomorrow morning when I start it up for the first time, cold start, is there a cloud of smoke out the back or not? If there is, I've just wasted a lot of time and money. If there isn't, I might finally have sorted this thing's oil consumption. We shall see. So after all that, you can see the car went back together. There was a few issues I didn't show just because of time, but broadly it went back together okay, and wonder of wonders, started okay, there's been no issues, it's running fine. And just as a quick reminder, the main reason I did all of this was because this is what happened on startup normally. And as you can see, it's not starting well, it's smoking, there's a lot of issues. Obviously we know what those were. And the next morning, as I said just in the video previous, I got a video of a cold start. It sat overnight, I'd been out for a good long run the night before, and this is now what a cold start looks like. So, finally, it looks like I'm at the end of the road when it comes to the engine issues with this car. And I say engine issues, fundamentally that engine is a good, reliable unit. All I've had is issues with seals, guides, wear and tear parts and stuff like that, which has taken me a while to get to the bottom of. But hey, it's done, it's working, the car is running great, I'm happy, and finally, for those of you that have been through this slog with me from the start, you might actually see me make a video that doesn't involve me taking the engine of a Lexus GS apart and then putting it back together. And it's going to start with getting a set of these on, because I'm finally going to start tackling my main issue with this car. That's heavy, which is the handling. So next video, I promise, will not be engine content. But if you did like what we've seen so far, please consider subscribing. If you liked what you saw, give me a like and comment down below what you think. All feedback useful. But as I said, look forward to seeing you next time where I'm not doing engine work. Thank goodness.